With all the things that have been happening with the government shutdown and SNAP benefits and everything here in the United States, it's no wonder that news such as if China were to impose blockade on Taiwan, existential crisis could be triggered, Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi says. An existential crisis. She goes on, and as we all know, Japan is trying to amend their constitution to allow more foreign deployments. If it involves the use of military force, it could by all means become a situation of existential crisis, she said. In such a crisis, the limited exercise of the right of collective self-defense is possible, allowing the deployment of self-defense forces for defense as well as the use of force. Rescuing Japanese nationals would be top priority, Prime Minister stressed, but we also must be prepared for the worst-case scenario. The worst-case scenario. And what she's talking about here, let's go a little bit farther into the... When asked about a scenario in which China imposes a naval blockade on Taiwan, Takaichi said, "It is assumed that China will use military force to prevent the arrival of U.S. forces." So she's speaking specifically about a Chinese military blockade of Taiwan. Obviously, this did not go down well in China. Chinese diplomats threat to cut dirty neck of Japan's prime minister. The consul general in Osaka posted that message on his X before it was deleted. But before then, Ambassador George Glass of the United States captured it and pointed out the mask slips off again. China basically said, firmly opposes Japan's statements and warned of serious consequences if Tokyo aligns itself with Taiwanese defense initiatives. The new Prime Minister of Japan is basically she's being called the Iron Lady of Japan. She is absolutely for the increase, the development of weapon systems, the increase in size of the Japanese self-defense force. The Japanese self-defense force Navy is one of the largest in the world, one of the most capable in the world. Now has 2 aircraft carrier destroyers capable of flying F-35s off their decks. They are coming out with some of the best non-nuclear submarines in the world. They're coming out with Mogami-class frigates left and right. They have a new design for a destroyer of their own design, using a rail system, a railgun system that they've tested on a destroyer already, and looks like it's going to be standard issue. Against the Chinese, who are putting out aircraft carriers, just in the news today, on the war zone, that China's next aircraft carrier is going to be nuclear-powered. You can see these two nations, who have hundreds of years of history, are on another collision course. One of the things I always thought was possible in a conflict with China is that China would come out and stress to the neighboring countries of Taiwan that if you don't get involved, we won't involve you. You have Japan coming out now saying that they're going to be involved, making it clear that their involvement is almost assured thing, is assured. If that's the case, then where does that lead us? Where does that go? Years down the road. One of the things that caught my attention, and we'll go back to this in this article, we must also be prepared for the worst case scenario. Now, the worst case scenario involving China in a conflict is obviously the use of nuclear weapons. Japan is not a nuclear power, but it would take Japan all of about 10 minutes to become a nuclear power. The the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster being one of the prime examples that Japan is a primarily nuclear-powered society. Yes, using some of the same plutonium, uranium used in weapons-grade weapons. Now, are they at that stage now? No. Would it be in their best interest to do so? At this point, it's hard to say no. It's hard to say no. If you're Japan and you are living in a neighborhood with North Korea and China, it may be the only thing you can do is to become a nuclear-armed power. Their relationship with Taiwan goes back hundreds of years. I was reading a great article here about the curiously cozy relationship between Taiwan and Japan. And I'm going to be sure to link that in this. And it states in here that there's a almost nostalgic fondness in Taiwan for what was a brutal occupation by Japan for almost 60 years. But this article points out that who was more brutal were the communists. Imagine that. It points out there's a 77% of Japanese said there's a close relationship with Taiwan. 73% believe that Taiwan and Japan have good relations. And the poll was reciprocated. That's that right there. Japan is Taiwan's third largest trading partner. So they clearly have an economic interest in that. And let's just be practical. Let's just think about this on a practical and strategic level. This is Taiwan, obviously. And this is the first main island of Japan. 737 miles. Now, that's just the first main island. These are Japanese islands. And there was actually an exercise performed by the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force on that island chain just recently, as well as the U.S. Marine Corps training exercise in that area as well. Things in the Pacific are hot. And with all this government shutdown and the SNAP benefits stuff, you can see why things like this story are just going to go into the ether. They're going to get some recognition outside of the United States. They're going to get a lot of recognition here. You're going to barely hear a word. But this is absolutely relevant to the national security interest of the United States. Our treaty relationship with Japan is firm and solid. They are clearly one of the most important allies we have. Far more important than any ally we may have in the Eastern Mediterranean area. Far more important. You would almost say that in the Eastern Mediterranean, they're almost irrelevant in comparison to our relationship with Japan. Sure, there'd be people here who would say differently, but I think it's obvious. Our relationship with Japan is one of the most critical we have. And you now have the Prime Minister of Japan saying that her country will become involved in a military conflict involving China and Taiwan and the United States. That their first priority would be, of course, to rescue their nationals. But given the hundreds of years of animosity, the history of Japan and China, China has not forgotten what happened in World War II. Tens of millions of Chinese people died in that conflict against the Japanese, who were doing the most horrible and atrocious things humanly possible. Look up Unit 731 if you want to know any of the history of this, look up Unit 731 and be horrified at the, we'll just say, bad guy German type experiments that were done to the Chinese, and worse. And that's just in the last 100 years. It could certainly be a lot worse. Just a moment as I stop my cat from jumping on my screen. No. Mr. Simba. But I wanted to get on here, and I wanted to make it a point to let everyone know things are heating up. Things are heating up. Now, is it going to come to blows? No, probably not. But what we do know is that Japan is now on a path of rearmament, of a more militaristic posture, certainly a more aggressive defense posture, and that China is not happy about it, and they will definitely be keeping an eye out. Mr. Simba. Kitty cats, I tell you what. But that's all I got. I'll put these three stories in the description, and thank you.